supposed to be extra. Because you got yours right, I got mine here. That's what I was wondering. I probably said it down, they seem to be extras.
Those are, oh yeah. You don't need to. You're good. I just gave everybody a copy.
That's what you're using today.
Yep.
Test it.
Okay. Good evening. At this time, I would like to call the October 4th, 2023 meeting of the Board of Education to order. We will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda presented before us this evening. Motion?
So moved, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. Second?
Kathy?
Thank you, Kathy. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes. The minutes of the September 20th, 2023 Board of Education meeting are presented for approval. May I have a motion to accept these minutes? Motion?
So moved.
Thank you, VP. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Amanda. Any additions, corrections, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. We have no one signed up for comments tonight, so we will transition and begin with our superintendent and his comments.
Thank you, Board President. Good evening, board members. I'm going to keep my comments brief just because I know there's potentially some longer discussions that need to happen tonight. First and foremost, do want to remind folks that Hispanic Heritage Month is still going on through October 15th. Please make sure to, go out, recognize the contributions of various Latinos in this great country of ours, and so I don't want to forget that because people often forget. We usually announce it and then we forget to talk about it again. I also want to make sure that recognize a couple other groups. This is also October, the month of October is also National Principals Appreciation Month. So I want to give a heartfelt thanks to our principals. They do a tremendous amount of work. They are the liaisons between district office and families. They are the liaison between the board and families oftentimes, and they do a lot of great hard work for our students and families, and I just want to make sure we appreciate them. We will be featuring them in the brief throughout the month of October, but the board members, obviously, if you visit a school, make sure you just say thanks to the principals. I know that board member Jamaica's favorite principal is always in the audience, so I'm sure you will give her some love. I also want to recognize that on October 2nd, we had National Custodian and Cleaners Appreciation Day, so we will also be recognizing them, but they are the backbone to this organization. Our custodians, our cleaners, along with some other groups, but they do a tremendous amount of work, often don't get the spotlight, and so I want to make sure I recognize them tonight and thank them for all their dedication and hard work. There is a change to our community eligibility food program. I do want to clarify a couple things on that. One is that everyone will be fed and continue to be fed in the district, so I want to make sure that's clear. But we are asking for folks to fill out the application because it helps us with some important data points. Sometimes that's not as clear when we send out an electronic communication, so I want to make sure to emphasize that again. We do want those child nutrition packets back if we can, but it does not impact your ability to get food. We use it for other data points to make sure that we are still meeting a certain threshold, and it just informs other things in the district. So I want to make sure we put a plug on that. We have started a Speak Up safety tip line. You may have seen this on social media. It's real important. It's another way for parents, students to report things. That's obviously under the leadership of Andrea Toe Freeman and her team, who have gotten that up and going. That is in partnership with various folks. It's a really great feature for us to have. Another way to report things in the district regarding bullying, violence, things they may hear. Again, it's a Speak Up safety tip line. After-school programming is going to start in the majority of schools on October 10th. There are some schools, because we have some staffing shortages, we're going to need to delay. Dr. Carlos and his team will be putting out a communication to families for that. I wanted to make sure that everyone would hear that from me. We're excited to get it going, but obviously it's tough. Everyone's struggling with getting folks. So we're going to start a portion of our schools, and then the other portion we're going to hope to have them online no later than November 1st. We also have a go home early drill this Friday. It's just 15 minutes early, so not too tremendously early, but it's a way that we practice an emergency early release. So I do want to make sure I make that point here as well. Remind people it is on our calendar, but want to make sure I tell you that. And last but not least, I want to inform the board, and I'll be sending this out more formally to the board. We'll be doing a groundbreaking ceremony on the Thursday, 10/19, and that will occur out in the back of Mount Pleasant Field. We think it's important to visually have a groundbreaking. You can see that if you have been behind Mount Pleasant, there is some very visual work starting. There's some trees being removed. The bleachers have been removed, but we'll be doing a really cool kind of groundbreaking as the impetus to some of our Schenectady revitalization plan. So I want the board members to keep that on your calendar. Again, Thursday, 10/19, and I believe it's going to be at 3:30 p.m., okay? Sorry, I forgot to mention the time earlier. So that concludes my comments.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Soled. We will continue with board comments, starting with Board Member Amanda.
No comment.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Board Member Jamaica?
No comment.
Board Member Erica?
I'm gonna talk tonight. No, I'm just kidding. No comment.
Board Member Vivian?
Good evening. I actually have a comment. As we all know, there has been extensive conversation surrounding the equitable grading policy, which has resulted in some important changes being made, and I appreciate the discussion surrounding the grading policy, specifically concerns raised by members of the community regarding the potential negative impact of late assignments without penalty. In an effort to meet both sides of this argument in the middle, I have proposed 2 amendments to the grading policy to be considered by the board for a vote. The intended goal for these amendments is to help ensure that we are teaching children the importance of timeliness without lowering their overall quarterly grade. I want to be clear that concerns over non-penalized late assignments are not perseverative. There are potential far-reaching consequences that are important to parents and caregivers in our community. The book titled Grading for Equity asserts that the grading practices outlined in this book help with personal agency. I am going to argue that with some of the practices outlined in this book, it pushes a destructive ideology that is not immediately made apparent. And I am concerned that the unintended result of this pursuit for equity will be the manufacturing of engineered equality of results. Ian Rowe has defined personal agency as the force of one's free will, guided by moral discernment. The philosophy of equity, as outlined in the book, however, reinforces the dangerous ideology that children are trapped by their circumstances and have no other way of being. Therefore, to be equitable, we must determine which supports get redistributed in order to manufacture an equal outcome of results. A grading policy built around this philosophy will not produce a learning environment that is conducive to the organic success of each child. Personal agency, however, focuses on helping each child create an extraordinary outcome for themselves. Karl Marx said, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." I am cautioning us to be wary of drafting a policy that mirrors this philosophy while labeling our practices as equitable. Therefore, I am going to argue that there is a clear dichotomy between the philosophy of personal agency and the philosophy of equitable grading. To again quote Ian Rowe, we must teach children that there is in fact an empowering alternative by creating a dynamic where children understand that they are not in a hopeless situation. How do we provide this empowering alternative? It is imperative for us to create a culture of excellence within our schools and to teach our children that they can determine their own trajectory in life regardless of their current circumstances. We owe it to our children to provide them with an academic community that respects them enough to hold them to high expectations. The antithesis of this would be to build a grading policy based on the dangerous misconception that children who belong to a certain socioeconomic status or other defined intersectionality are systemically prevented from meeting basic minimum expectations that would only help them to build a brighter future for themselves. There is not a single person sitting in this room today who would have reached their level of accomplishment if it were not for their continued demonstration of timeliness, respect for themselves and others, accountability, and responsibility. This serves as evidence that executive functioning skills, personal growth mindset, and discipline are all essential for success and stability, which is all the more reason for us to strive to model these qualities for our children in all facets of life. If we are not going to model and reinforce continued opportunities for growth and development for our students, then we are preparing them to navigate through life without a compass. The overemphasis on subject mastery or talent minimizes the need for character development, personal growth mindset, and self-discipline. This can cause some children to grow up finding themselves in situations where their talent has taken them to a place where their underdeveloped character may not be able to keep them. And we will have had a direct hand in that harsh realization when we could have helped prevent it during their childhood by emphasizing the practice of basic essential life skills instead of undermining their importance. This is the far-reaching consequence associated with permissible late assignments that members of our community have raised concerns about. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Vivian. Board Member Kathy?
Yes, good evening. This evening, prior to the meeting, we had a meeting of the audit committee, and the audit for fiscal year 22-23 has been completed, and the auditors, PKF, O'Connor, and Davies, have said that we have an unmodified opinion, meaning that it's a clean audit, and there are a few things to note in terms of some minor deficiencies and so forth, but our audit is complete. So that's what we have concluded. That audit will be voted on or adopted on October 18th. It will be submitted to State Ed as per requirements before October 15th. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Board Member Kathy. Vice President Nohalani?
No comment.
Thank you. And we do have someone who would like to speak to the board. And before I call you up, I just want to read a little something, okay? And welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you. You're welcome. So good evening. We are about to convene in the public comment period of our meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold a public comment period, we have chosen to do so because we believe it's crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is a period designed to be is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns and questions tonight. We ask that the speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than to the audience. The board will now welcome public comments. Each individual, or we have 3 minutes to share your comments with us. And if you don't mind coming up right to the podium, and again, welcome.
There's a microphone there, okay? Just make sure it's on.
Is it Hasna? Okay, welcome.
Hello.
Say test, say test, it works.
Testing.
Yeah, it's on, right?
It's on.
Yeah.
It's on. Yeah.
There it is,
Okay,
it's on.
there you go.
See, testing's the
There
magic.
you go.
Good evening, board members of Schenectady City School District. My name is Hasna Syed, and I am a student at Schenectady High School. I am president of the National Honor Society over there, and as a Muslim student, my concern, as you may see from my little description I put there, is I wanted to talk about having a day off for Eid, if it was possible. Just taking it into consideration, I would really appreciate. I hope you don't mind, I have a little bit of a description on my phone. Schenectady is a very diverse district with students from all different backgrounds and faiths, and to prove the school support for that equality and inclusivity, I personally believe they should respect the Muslim holidays as well. In the past 2 years, I've seen both Holi added as a day off for Hindus and Jewish holidays now having off this year as well, which I do know pre-COVID was off before for the staff members, which I'm very supportive of both of these. Like I said, in my opinion, all of these religions should be respected. We are really only asking for a simple 1 day off, 2 days off maybe, but even 1 day off would make a huge difference. And I don't think that's a huge deal because we spent a full 30 days in school fasting, no complaints, empty stomach, we're in our classes and we're engaging. And the students that do have to take a day off for Eid, this can potentially harm our education because as somebody who's in those IB classes, that 1 day off means a lot. It puts us very behind. And I like this would create, excuse me, I'm very nervous.
That's okay. Take your time.
This would create a lot of extra stress and overwhelming a lot of these students who are just trying to celebrate, their own holiday. That's all I really have to bring to you. I just wanted you guys to take it into consideration. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Hasna, we thank you very much for coming. We always love to hear students talk with us, especially when they're advocating for something so important. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to reserve my comments until the very end. Okay, so we will begin. Our next order of business is the grading policy. The board has engaged in several extensive conversations around the grading policy for, at least the last 3 or 4 meetings. These discussions.
You're ahead of yourself.
I'm ready.
We have the social.
Oh, you got it. Yes.
Media.
So we will move towards, the social media lawsuit. And Superintendent Soler will provide some information and an overview.
Yeah, so, I'll give you the quickest overview I can, and that is basically across the state and really across the country, many school districts are jumping on a kind of a national lawsuit being brought before social media companies regarding their impact on teens and youth. And so this is was brought to us as a school system. It was vetted by our attorneys here for the board, Honeywell. Douglas Gerhardt and his team have vetted this. They believe it is something that we should be also a part of. Other districts in the capital region have also jumped on this as well. But again, obviously, it's ultimately the board's decision. But this would, if successful, this would, be something that we would also be a part of. So I just wanted to make sure that's kind of the simplest piece. I think they're going to look for potentially some damages. And the best thing I can compare it to is you probably heard across the state there's a lawsuit around vaping. Yes. And so many districts were compensated around the impact of vaping to their school systems. We don't know what this would come out to. Right now, there is no cost to jump into this and to be a part of this. So that's probably it in the most simplest form. So if there's any additional questions, I did not want the board to vote on this without having a discussion because obviously it is precedent setting in the sense that many of us probably use social media, and so it's like weird, right? You're going to sue something that many of us also use, but really it's around the impact on youth and the impact of schools, mental health, wellness, bullying, and things of that nature.
Is this being pursued by Letitia James in New York State, or is this national, or
Yeah, it's not national. It's being pursued by a law firm. I think they are described.
It's a law firm.
Yeah, it's a law firm.
Is it only New York State, or is it national? It's not.
It's national.
I
yeah.
thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a national.
And
yeah.
the question I had asked earlier, and to which you replied, is it is on a contingent fee basis, and that contingent fee agreement would be 25% to the law firms and 75% to
The rest
the
of the districts.
districts, or however it's developed and paid out. So.
And it looks like it's France Law Group, a
Yep.
professional law corporation.
Question. The lawsuit itself, while it may be seeking damages for the school districts, is there anything within the lawsuit or any conversation that you've heard that they're looking for regulations for social media groups, or is it just about damages and not changing?
Yeah, I believe that is the hope outcome is that these damages, if you hit them in their pocket,
Yep.
then maybe they'll be forced to put in some regulations.
Okay.
But it did not explicitly say that.
Okay.
I do have a question. I guess I'm curious, if school districts were to win this precedent-setting lawsuit regarding the harmful impact of social media on children, is there any benefit that would directly impact children as a result of the lawsuit? That aside, I know that the goal would be to hopefully have regulations put in place, but any other direct impact on children from this lawsuit?
Not that I can think of, but I would hope that it would be harder for kids of a certain age to maybe create accounts, be on accounts, but, it's tough. It's a bigger conversation, I think, more than just suing the social media. I mean, there are certain districts that have banned the use of technology in buildings like cell phones, which is a really different conversation, but that has kind of been their approach to try to address this at a local level. I don't know if we're there yet, but I would say that would change a lot of things, I think, that we're seeing as a result of use of social media tools like TikTok, Snapchat, things that have permeated into the school building. So I would say the first benefit would be hopefully it'd be harder for them to create it. The problem with technology is it's always adapting. Somebody else will invent something for other groups to get on. But I think the bigger conversation, and we're not having it yet, is the use of cell phones in schools. And we've done a really good job of trying to enforce our current policies. But I know in other communities, they've completely banned them to be in the buildings.
Any other questions? So I'll accept a motion to approve the social media litigation lawsuit. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kathy. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Amanda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Now, great advice.
Now, the next order of business is the grading policy. The board has engaged in several extensive conversations around the grading policy. These discussions elicited many questions, constructive criticism, modifications, and extensive conversations. I'll accept the motion to approve grading policy number 7218. May I accept the motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Board Member Jamaica, thank you, Kathy. Any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to start off by saying, so I submitted an amendment specifically on assignments and having some type of, I guess, penalization if they're turned in late. And when just for the board, when I put this together, it was just like a cumulative list of anything that had to do with assignments. I know that it was like a little repetitive and it probably was confusing because we had already talked about it, but I just basically took everything about assignments and put it in my one document. And I also was thinking a lot about the conversation that we had in the last meeting, and something that I think a couple people mentioned it, but Jamaica, you said it, is that it comes down to sometimes we just have to trust the teachers and letting them sort of have the flexibility in knowing what's best for their students and how they want to teach their class. So I just kind of thought on that for a while and was trying to think of kind of what's the best solution from both sides, the side of penalizing everything if it's a day late, if it's a minute late, whatever, to just not really worrying about if an assignment is turned in late as long as it's done well. So that's what my thought was going into this. And
Amanda,
so-
before you start, can I?
Sure.
Okay, so I would like to remind the board that the amendments will be presented one at a time. Board members have an opportunity to discuss, ask clarifying questions, and share thoughts specifically around the amendments presented. We will then vote on them separately. Just a reminder, the debate discussion must be confined to the relevancy to the motion at hand. The maker or creator of the motion, in this case it would be Amanda, has first right to the floor if they wish to do so. I would also like to remind the board that we create the policy and the superintendent is charged with determining the best course of action to implement the policies through designing processes and procedures in collaboration with his staff. And lastly, a policy equity tool, which all of you have a copy, and I know the policy committee used it as well, was shared with the board to help ground discussion around the policy. All of you should have a copy to refer to, and I just want to just highlight a few of those questions, just so that everyone is reminded, but also the public. There are several questions on this equity tool, but one of them is, what do you want to accomplish with this policy or practice? What is the intent of the policy or practice? Who does the policy impact? Is the policy clear and captures the values and beliefs of the organization? Is there evidence of the primary stakeholder perspective in the analysis, and are there diverse perspectives captured? And there's many more, but again, this tool the policy committee used, and also it was sent to the board just to kind of ground us in the work. So I will now pass it over to board member Amanda.
Okay, so the first part of my amendment, and I know, with what Bernice said, that this might be a little bit more granular. It was just like my thoughts, basically. So I'm sorry if it's too specific, but we'll just go with it for right now. So number one is, as part of the syllabus, teachers will outline which assignments will have due dates, and if there will be a grade deduction on the assignment for missed deadlines, and how the deduction will be applied, such as points per day late or a percentage reduction, however, they would choose to do that. And can I explain that?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
And my thinking behind that was, if it's known at the beginning of the year, you really set those expectations. The parents will hopefully, know what's to be expected. The students will know, and they will also know how their grade will be impacted if it is the missed deadline. And just one more thing, just on the, my thoughts behind this is that, maybe a teacher doesn't want to let every assignment go without a penalty for it being late, or, maybe it's just really kind of catering to, teacher-specific teaching styles and trying to make like the best of both worlds, and, leaving it up to the teachers. And yeah, that's it.
So any questions, comments, or discussion? Yep.
It hasn't
Board
been
member
seconded
Jamaica,
yet.
and then,
Well, it
hasn't
hasn't
been
been seconded for
seconded yet.
conversation.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I make a motion for a second for this amendment?
Second.
Second, okay, thank you.
Now you can discuss.
Yep, board member Jamaica.
The giving a grade deduction on an assignment based on its timeliness is grading for the behavior, not the knowledge content of the student. The purpose that we're trying to create a grading policy is meant to address bias and provide a letter grade based on knowledge of the subject, which is based on our New York State standards. As written, this proposed amendment would include behavior as part of the grade instead of knowledge content. Additionally, we have already addressed and indicated that tardiness will still be recorded and addressed with comments in other areas of reporting to parents. The only other comment I would make in regard to this, because it has been brought up about teachers having the ability to teach to the class, we are not restricting how a teacher teaches. We are saying there will be consistency for grading, and the teacher still has the ability to discuss and talk about due dates and why they're important without it being part of the grade.
Any other questions, comments?
Amanda, I would argue that the importance of due dates being explained to students, of course, is definitely key. But I also believe that we need to provide teachers with the ability to enforce the due date, otherwise said due date really has no teeth. And that's really my comment on that.
Any others?
So just for a point of clarity, we had currently written that they had till the end of that quarter or marking period. So I just want to remind the board that, and that if a kid didn't submit anything by the time that it would be, the penalization was, they wouldn't be scored. So, I know that I'm just trying to better understand the request is that it's on individual assignments. So for example, if the kid can do all the work and would have earned 100, the highest they can get is a 90 because they were late, and the teacher says it's 10 points off because it was late. So we would be penalizing the kid just because of the lateness, but not the quality. That's, Amanda, is that kind of what you're saying?
So
the highest that kid could get is a 90?
No, I don't think, so because this was broken down, it might be a little bit harder to understand. It might be a little harder to understand, because when you take everything together, I think it paints a little bit of a better picture than looking at these individually.
Okay.
And Bernice, I don't know if I can like give an example without going too far ahead. Because one of the other points that I had is that, teachers must be able to document and show that they provided support and guidance on assignments if it's on an assignment that they have indicated they're going to issue a penalty on. So that way, you really kind of have a checks and balance that the teacher is keeping up and they're keeping tabs and they're helping the student, maybe, break through some of the struggles that they might be facing to get this in on time. And there's also, the last one that I had on here was sort of like a special and unique circumstances. Like, this is kind of like a safety net, I guess you could call it, where it could be considered with the approval of the parent, guardian, student, and the teacher. So if you do happen to find that something was going on, like really stressing a student out, and the teacher, did feel like it was legitimate, that they could create this like special or unique circumstance and create like a plan to help the student, get that assignment in. So when you look at it just like individually, like it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of flexibility, and if you don't get it in by the end of the semester, then, or the interim, then, it is what it is. But there's a lot of steps. My intention is to sort of make it so there's a lot of steps throughout the way so that that doesn't happen.
I guess you have, I think, 5 components to this, which all revolve around attendance, which I think
The assignments.
in the very beginning, your statement was, we have to trust our teachers. And so you're trusting them to make some accommodations, you're trusting them to maybe not enforce the penalty. And so I think inherently in our regular policy that is already there, in the original one we recommended, and we just said that beyond the 10-week market period, there is no flexibility. At that point, the teacher is kind of not given the ability to grade something that, goes into the next market period that's maybe for the first market period. I think we would be allowing, in our original guidance, teachers flexibility to do whatever they need to support a kid, whether it's, hey, you had surgery, you were out 2 weeks, you can make up these assignments and I'm not going to penalize you. I want to just warn you that if we start putting these types of details in here, it really restricts that ability, and the only way it could get changed is by this board. And so I think policies inherently are designed to be a little bit more broad, to allow some flexibility and implementation, also in procedural pieces. And I guess the real question is, do you just want a consequence at some point within the 10 weeks to the kid's overall achievement grade based on attendance that's determined by the teacher? So like that to me was really the culmination of everything you have here, is if the teacher just says, Johnny is doing A work, but because he's always chronically late, or because I've done all these things and it's not responded, I'm going to be able to give him a B. That's really the fundamental question that I think I need to better understand based on these components of it. Because if the teacher can still say, no, I'm still going to give him an A, then I think what we already have meets that goal. Because again, we're going to trust the teacher. If we're going to say, no, the teacher has to demonstrate that even though Johnny missed 20 days of classes, how they still earned that A, that's different as well, because we were going to need some kind of record of why they determined that. Because then the next question is going to be, the student next to Johnny who got the A also missed 20 days but didn't get an A and did all the work and got a C. And so then that parent may say, well, he's telling me that other kids in the class missed as many days as he did, but they were able to get higher grades. It just really puts us in a tough spot. And I just wanted you to think of the implementation piece, because our kids watch each other. Like, they watch each other, right? They know who can get away with what and who can't, and so if we're going to allow the teacher to make that discretion, I think we can, but I don't think it should be a policy that says if the kid is unexcused, then they don't have the ability to earn higher than X grade. They have to take a deduction. That takes away the authority of the teacher. If the teacher is, if the student is on a legitimate reason, you're saying that then they must provide support and guidance on those assignments. I still think that takes away some of the teacher individuality to say, these are the expectations in my classroom. You should be able to do this on your own. There's after-school tutoring, there's supports. I think that does provide some student responsibility and family responsibility to say, how do we work this out with you as a school system? But I just want to be careful. I need to better understand that these amendments, do they ultimately result in a change in the overall class grade?
May I make a suggestion? Amanda, you mentioned as part of syllables. Well, to my knowledge, I don't know of too many teachers that are currently providing syllabus at the beginning of the year or beginning of the quarter. If this is going to be something where it's just too much of a point of contention, right? At minimum, can we consider having it in the policy where teachers do provide a syllabus at minimum quarterly, both to the student and to the family? We have high school students right now taking college courses in the high school. When you go to college in the real world, you get a syllabus. So that would assist children with reinforcing the concepts of time management, planning your work accordingly, planning your study time accordingly. So you have that map, you have that structure right in front of you at the beginning of the quarter. You know exactly what the expectations are, and teachers are there to help guide students according to their individual need, move accordingly. So if we're really going to dead and obliterate potential consequences for late assignments, at minimum, can we consider a requirement for a syllabus, depending on the grade level? Obviously elementary is different than middle school and high school, but that is something I would really like for us to consider.
Yeah, and I would argue that there's usually an opening week, that is, teachers do provide something, but if there is a case of that, that's up to the board to make it part of the policy, but I would argue that is a separate conversation, and I would also argue that I think our teachers do a really good job outlining the expectations of it, but I think what you're trying to say is if they put in the syllabus, if you don't hand in assignments, this is what could happen. Is that what you're trying to say?
Correct, and also so that the families, for those of us who are checking our students' homework and their Infinite Campus regularly, I want to see ahead of time, you have a quiz next week, so make sure you study every single day between now and next week because I have a quiz coming. That enables parents to give that additional support at home instead of learning about an assignment maybe a couple of days before it's due.
I would say that my back-to-school night, every teacher that I saw, I had a syllabus for at the middle school. Also, a syllabus, I'm not sure that I'm seeing the connection to the grading policy, right? Like, we're talking about what is the policy on grading? Mm-hmm. The syllabus is a separate tool inside the district, and if we feel that we need to address the syllabus and how that is streamlined within the district, that potentially could be a different policy for us to consider, but that it is not implicitly something that needs to be connected to the grading policy. And that we should discuss it as a policy committee. Do we need a policy that's specific around syllabus?
Yeah, Jamaica, I would just say real quick, again, remember policy, 30,000 feet. Yep. Regulations and procedures which me and the team develop is, 5 feet away. And in that document that you guys did see, there is a section that says, Section 3, Home to School Communication. Within 2 weeks of the beginning of the school year, all K through 12 teachers will provide students and or caregivers a syllabus that outlines course content, standards and skills, grading criteria, and expectations. This will, of course, look different at various grade levels. So I think it mirrors what you're saying, Vivian. So that would be a requirement that would have to be communicated to families. That is and again, this is the difference. Policy is board approved. Procedures and regulations is what I take your policy and I implement and develop. So that piece would be a part of the procedures and implementation piece, but I do not believe it's appropriate to live in the policy piece.
Right, and just to answer at least one of the questions
Sure,
you had,
yeah.
Superintendent, is, sort of what is the, overall point? Is it, so if you have, a student who, you know, has that subject mastery. They get an A in subject mastery, but their assignment was late and they're persistently late. It wasn't due to an excused absence or any type of legitimate accepted excuse. Then my answer would be yes, their grade would be deducted by a predetermined amount. I don't know if it would be a full grade. Like, that's something that could be worked out. I didn't want to get that specific in here. And the point of that is to really, you know, really hold the students accountable while still giving them support to help them at every, you know, step of the way, and to make sure that they are as close to that deadline as possible. And I didn't talk to anyone before this, but it mirrors sort of what Vivian was saying earlier, where, you know, it's just sort of forcing the students a little bit, you know, maybe a lot of it outside their comfort zone, and helping them focus, and you know, giving them something. Because I'm honestly, like, I am so worried that just having a separate note on a report card that says, you know, Johnny didn't get any of his assignments in on time, like, what impact does that really have? You know, hopefully the parents will see that and, you know, maybe light a little fire for the next semester. But to really kind of provide that incentive, having some type of grade deduction, like I said, doesn't have to be a lot, would be enough to really incentivize kids to get these their assignments in on time.
But I do want to remind everyone, though, there are different forms. Like, the homework is one form of a formative assessment. There are a multitude of ways that teachers assess whether a student has gained the content knowledge that they need. So that's one point, because I think that's really, really important, that, you know, with the questioning, with quizzes, with multiple things that teachers do that can assess that. The other piece, too, is that and I know everyone has said this, but we are specifically looking at what our kids know and can do, right? If they're not completing, and I know this was part of the conversation that we had on the board too, if students are not completing homework and not doing any of the formative assessments in their classroom, whether it's not answering questions, whether it's not engaging in conversations with their elbow buddy, if it's not doing their projects, it's very, very rare that you will have a student that doesn't do any of those things and scores or earns, I shouldn't even say scores, earns an A or a B and even a C. If they don't do all those things, I doubt very much we will see those higher scores. So it's a culmination of everything that we're looking at, and we're trusting that the teachers inside those classrooms are doing all those different types of formative assessments. I hear what you're saying in terms of, because what I'm hearing is that we want to develop students that are responsible, right? But there are other ways that students can also show that responsibility. And this is a great way for teachers to start having the conversations in those professional learning communities, they're called PLCs, to have conversations about how do we get our students to understand the importance of, you know, of deadlines. But those deadlines might look totally different. It's a paradigm shift. This is all very different. So I just wanted to kind of add some of those things, just say some of those
And what I would say is, Amanda, I really understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
If we're going to, the whole point of this policy was to remove biasness, so that ex-teacher Tyrone does not give a kid negative 10 points, while Mr. Silvestri gives negative 20 points for anything late in his class. So if we're going to want to advocate, I would really encourage the board to think about what is that penalty. Because if we do not do that, then we will continue to permeate some of the practices where every classroom is different. And kids will tell you, Mr. Silvestri don't play with homework, I'm losing 25 points, or I'm losing 5 points. They know where their tension points are. The other thing is the district does have a homework policy, Policy 8440, which does provide guidance to the teachers and to all of us as a district around what homework should be, what should it consist of. And so I would recommend that, homework maybe be revisited through that policy versus a part of a grading policy, because here it does provide, again, it does ultimately give it to teacher discretion under such circumstances, making sure the teachers can determine what's best for their student. But it also gives them clear direction that students may not be assigned homework for punitive purposes. For example, talking in class. That is already a board policy. that has that language in there. So, tardiness would be considered a behavioral type thing, and that we would be wanting to make it here. So I just want us to be careful. If the board is supportive of the board member Amanda's recommendation, then I would just say, give me a percentage threshold to enforce if that's a route you want to go. Because if we do not, then that permeates biasness across the system.
Okay, so, oh, Kathy?
I was just going to, I'm pretty certain it's going to be reiteration at this point, but reiterate, and in my experience, that the board is responsible for the policy. The superintendent and the staff are responsible for the implementation, the procedures, the process. And that's what we're here to do. What we're talking about now, as to Jamaica's point, that particular point dealt with behavior, not with the grading practice. And the point about equity grading is that we're trying to, as the superintendent indicated, take out as much of the bias as we can. I don't think we ever get it completely out. But for example, people who have more affluence, for example, will often do extra credit, or they will have more class participation. They have the resources to have other means to contribute. And so this is what's trying to take out those kinds of biases by emphasizing the content as opposed to the behavioral aspects. And once again, I go back to the fact that I think we're treading on dangerous waters if we try to implement specific procedures for a district as big as we are, and that needs to be done by the staff and the teachers.
Okay.
So that's my position.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Kathy. I now move that Amendment 1 be added to the proposed grading policy, replacing existing language on how assignments would be graded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Vivian and Amanda opposed? Aye.
Aye.
If you can keep, okay, so Erica, VP, Jamaica, and Kathy?
Yes, I said
Okay.
aye. I mean, I said opposed.
Okay, so the motion carries. This amendment will not be added to the grading policy. We're going to move to number 2. Board Member Amanda?
Okay, so this is all, maybe this is still too specific, and I should have just kept it more high level, as, assignments can be, deductions can be made on assignments if they're past the deadline, so this might fall into the same category as being too specific. But it says, if a student does miss a deadline due to an excused absence, the student cannot be penalized for handing the assignment in late. And I know that there's a whole list of, that New York State put together that I think we, Schenectady, go by, that is like a list of excused absences, and that's what I would mean by excused absences.
Okay. Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Second? Okay. Thank you, Vivian. Okay, any questions, comments, discussion? Okay. Okay. I move that amendment number 2 be added to the proposed grading policy, replacing existing language on how assignments would be graded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Amanda, opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The motion carries. So this
No.
one,
Does not carry.
the motion doesn't carry, yep. And I was about to say that doesn't go into the, all right, so we will move to the third one. Amanda, Board Member Amanda?
So this one says, teachers must document and be able to show that they provided support and guidance on assignments. If it's an assignment that they issue a penalty for a late assignment, they can obviously offer that support on any assignment. This was just saying specifically if it's an assignment that has like a deadline.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Vivian. Any questions, comments, discussion? Board Member Jamaica?
As has been discussed, teachers will be required to show that they provided support and guidance via feedback on all assignments, not just those that are late. So in addition to us not using tardiness as part of the grade, I don't know if it's duplicative or simply not needed because they are to give feedback on all assignments, regardless of whether or not they're tardy.
Right, and like I said before, like this was just it was supposed to be like a cumulative list, so that's one of the duplicate parts, and I just wanted to specify like, you know, specifically to really make sure that if it's an assignment that's graded based on timeliness, that all of that would have to be documented to show that the student was given fair chance to submit the assignment in on time.
Okay. I move that Amendment 3 be added to the proposed grading policy, replacing existing language on how assignments will be graded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Amanda, opposed?
Aye.
The motion does not carry. Okay, and we have a fourth one. Amanda, Board Member Amanda.
Yeah. This is probably another repeat that's already in there, so just bear with me, but it says persistently late work must always be indicated as a non-academic behavior upon discovery to parents, guardians, support, appropriate support staff, and on the intern reports. So that's not a change. I don't know how you want to handle that. It's not a change to what's already there.
Yeah.
It was just
Okay, okay.
Do
And,
you want to withdraw that
yeah,
for consideration?
because it's
Okay,
not
withdraw.
any different. It's not any different than what's in there
Yeah.
already. Yeah.
okay. Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Mhm.
And then the fifth one?
We can withdraw this one too. It says
Okay.
late assignments cannot be accepted for any type of credit if turned in after the interim in which the assignment was due. I know that was a repeat. I didn't know this was going to be the setup, so I apologize for that.
Okay, no problem.
So we can withdraw that one.
Okay, and then number 6, do you want to continue with that one as well?
It might be a repeat, but I'll read it for, discussion.
Okay, sure.
This was the one that special or unique circumstances can be considered with the approval of the parent, guardian, student, and the teacher, and then conditions of the special circumstance must be documented. And this was like specific to the deadline, pushing the deadline back, or, creating, some other type of way for the student to get credit. That's kind of what this was focusing on.
I agree, but have edits to the way you wrote it. Because, so the way that I see it, that I think sounds slightly different, in the event that assignments are missed due to documented special unique circumstances, the teacher will, at their discretion, allow for assignments to be accepted beyond the end of the quarter or give new assignments for the purpose of grading knowledge content. Because I'm thinking of the very rare occasion, the student breaks his leg and is out of school for a certain amount of time, and it's documented. At the same time, I do have cause and would love to hear other people's feedback. Are we getting, too close to that gray area again? While I understand the very rare occasion it does happen, right? Is it the way that the grading policy is currently written? Do we need to add this to make sure there's that clear line for the unknown broken leg? Whatever student breaks their leg next, it was not me. Right, yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I wouldn't disagree, because there's always a possibility where some may run into a circumstance or the thought process of, well, you didn't write it down, therefore you can't enforce it. So currently, the way that the current proposed policy is written, it just says that you can't turn in an assignment past the current quarter. So under certain circumstances, having it specified that a student will be able to turn in an assignment past a quarter due to a special circumstance, I'm not opposed.
If you don't mind, I'm going to have Mike kind of talk on that.
So it is true when the board moved from the 5-week to the end of the quarter that did change things, but if you look at the parameters, it does discuss the ability for the principal
Yeah, down at the bottom.
Oh, no.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's down at the very bottom of the, right?
It had a whole hierarchy of
Yep.
people who had to approve it.
I don't know technically if that requires any change to the board policy, because it's written, but it does say a principal can approve an NG or an
Right. Yeah. So I think I know it's hard to believe, but you really did a good job, the board, in the policy reviews the last couple of times, because you did address, kids with broken legs, all kinds of different circumstances. I think the biggest thing here is that if you allowed to go, what we changed, remember last time what we changed was they can go into the second marking period, right? Like, so first marking period, first 10 weeks, then they had 5 weeks into the next. If it goes beyond that, then I think that I just want to make sure we're not talking about that. It's got to be still within the same quarter.
Well, it's Amanda's thought process. But here's how I'm understanding,
we changed it.
especially,
We changed
but
it.
especially with, thank you for reminding me the whole principal thing, because I'm like, is there something that I'm just not remembering? That the way the policy is currently written, if a student had a special circumstance, they would get an incomplete with approval from the building principal, which in essence allows for them to get that grade after the end of the marking period, but only under special circumstances and the approval of the principal.
Yeah, so it says students in grades 6 through 12 will have until the end of the quarter to resolve incomplete grades. No grade or incomplete marcation will not be utilized without the authorization from the building principal. So again, teacher determined, teacher advocate, Mr. Green, I need to give this kid an incomplete, this is the situation. But I will say that Andrea's team does a good job making sure kids with broken legs who can't come to school get tutoring, but that's a separate conversation. But I will say that if that is the case and the teacher says, I can't give this kid enough of a grade, I haven't seen him enough for the following reasons, then they do have that ability. The kid's not penalized, the kid just doesn't receive a grade for that quarter, so that way the kid could get a grade change later on. And the only ones that give grades is teachers, so I want to be clear of that. Principal can't come back and say, I think you get an A because, I didn't hear back. So we don't want that to happen. So that's why teachers are the only ones that control the grades, but they do need permission to use NG and incomplete potentially. And we haven't determined if it was NG, incomplete, if it's NA, no, or if it's NE, no evidence. So, we don't know yet, but we just put those in quotes on our document.
Okay.
All right, so if this is just kind of echoing that, then unless someone thinks that it needs to be more specific, then I would be okay withdrawing this one.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. Any further discussion on the original motion?
I do move to amend the motion on the floor.
Okay, and the same protocol will be followed. Okay. You may begin, Board Member Vivian.
Did we need a second?
Yes,
Or-
a second.
Second.
You have a second?
All right, so really quickly, there are two. So where it states the K through 12 grading bullet number 3 on the draft policy, where it states grades for assignments must represent what students have demonstrated in their learning and not non-academic behaviors. Students will be provided with opportunities to retake assessments or show higher levels of proficiency on a later assessment, so that grades must accurately reflect students' most current level of mastery. The amendment that I'm proposing is to add a sentence at the end which states teachers may require reasonable remediation by the student before students are able to retake an assessment for a new grade.
Any questions, comments, discussion? Board Member Jamaica?
Question. Are we, I'm reading it again because the word about may require reasonable remediation by the student before students are able to retake an assessment for a new grade. So is it the understanding that this would then put in the policy if a teacher, the student bombs, right? I mean, are we talking they just didn't answer any of the questions, or like they answered them all and they all were wrong, that the teacher's going to give feedback on that assessment that the student's going to get back, right? So if they're,
I
right?
think it's more, and Vivian, you can clarify, I think this will help clarify. There was 3 lessons that were given on algebra. The algebra exam was given after the 3 assignments. The student didn't do the 3 assignments. the teacher says, look, I'm not going to give you this test because you didn't do the 3 assignments, and you're going to fail it because you already failed it once because you didn't do the 3 assignments. You need to do the 3 assignments first, and then I'd let you take the test again. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not penalizing their grade, and it is
No,
giving them the
no.
opportunity to, and we're having them turn in the assignments, so we have something to look at so that we can determine their level of mastery. And they didn't turn in their assignments, so how can we determine their mastery because they didn't turn them in?
I would say the what I support here, and just I'm not a voting member, but I can definitely provide my feedback, is that it's up to the teacher discretion. And so she says teachers may require reasonable remediation. So again, we have been really centered around still empowering our teachers. I don't really see an objection to that, but that would be my piece. It's only to add one more sentence to what we already kind of have. And again, we are empowering our teachers to make a determination to talk to the principal about, the kid didn't do any work, I want to give him an incomplete and keep working with him maybe next quarter. That's going to still be, so I don't view that as a negative, because you're saying teachers may require reasonable remediation by the student before the students are able, and it's not to take the exam the first time, but to retake the exam.
Correct.
So,
To retake it.
I'm going to argue your point a little bit, Superintendent. I'm
Sure.
going to pick on these two because they keep looking at me the whole time. So see, Tyrone and Damani both failed the test, right? And Dr. Chisholm,
I think they're
Dr.
jealous he
Chisholm
wants
loves
the Bills
Damani,
game.
so she's not going to require him any remediation, but Tyrone is doing too much in class all the time, so he's going to get required some. So the point of the policy we're kind of taking away
Sure.
because of that.
But remember, Tyrone was still able to take the test the first time.
Right, but
It would
now
be-
he's got some busy work to do to be able to take it again, and Damani doesn't.
Right.
I think that's where the audit could come into play, the documentation would come into play. So if they ever got wind that one had to do remediation and the other didn't, and it got brought up to whoever, the argument could be made that yes, that was not fair, that they both should have been made to do it. But if one did all the assignments and the other one didn't, and they both bombed, it's possible that one just had a really bad day, and that's why they wouldn't need remediation, and the other one didn't do any assignments, so, it's not penalizing them, it's encouraging them and showing them and trying to, help them prevent that mistake from happening again. Like, if you do the assignments, the whole point of that is so that you learn and practice so you don't, fail the test.
That's,
And
based
I
on the
wouldn't
assumption that assignments are going to teach me that. Like, again, I'm saying neither of them did their assignments, right? And that could very well happen. And
then if
Damani, you're
if
quiet,
both are made
so
to do,
you can just take the test
I
again,
think
but Tyrone,
that's
you're
where
not,
the
so.
audit, it's not
do
gonna
your
be
assignments.
perfect, 100%, either way.
Well, I wouldn't argue that it's punitive because you're just having them do the assignments that were initially given in the first place. You're not asking them to do anything extra. You're asking them to do what they were already asked to do.
Right.
And it's not necessarily going to come out in the audit, because the way I understand the audit is to look at the whole, right? And if there is some major discrepancy, like, I'm making this up, everyone failed the class, right? What happened? Or, all the girls got A's, but all the boys got F's, right? Like, if there's a discrepancy, I don't know that an audit goes down to the micro level of, oh, well, at this particular test, half the kids had to redo the assignment, but the other half didn't. If they failed and they wanted to retake it, I don't know that happens. And it also, to Erica's point, doesn't get us past the bias, right? Like, 2 people, I'm sorry that you guys failed, all right? And neither of you did the assignments. But you know what? Damani always comes in early and brings me a coffee. And so I'm not going to make him redo the assignments because I feel like he just knows it. He just had a bad day, right? Or like there's that, like, oh, well, I know Tyrone was just being a smartass and didn't feel like doing it, but, Damani was having a bad day. It happens. I know he knows this material, even though I didn't get any of his assignments back. He participated in class and was answering during class time, even though, right? Because it's not just that there are these homework assignments or there's just the in-class assignments, that there's this accumulation of information. And I really appreciate this conversation, because I was definitely struggling with this one about, does it put us in that paradigm to create a system where bias will show up. And I agree with Erica.
I don't know, I
Yes.
mean, because then if you really wanted to run with that argument, then all formative assessments have the potential to be biased.
Yes, they do.
So, however, though, again, so then if all formative assessments have the potential to be biased, why are we assigning any of them? But then how do we know that our students are actually learning? Where is the practice for what they're learning? Like this is where we get too lost in the weeds. I think that if giving it in the policy that a teacher has the room to be able to require remediation, then maybe in the procedure more specifically address how you would go about doing that. So per procedure, you are making sure that you are eliminating bias, but to not give a teacher that type of room whatsoever, how can we say that we're letting a teacher teach when if a teacher honestly believes that, no, this student really should be required to do this work before, if I'm going to be required per policy to let them take the test, I'm going to be setting them up for failure again if they're not actually doing the work that was supposed to prepare them for the test in the first place.
But they still have the opportunity to call home.
And they still have the opportunity for feedback to that student.
Right.
Okay,
They
that's
need to
great.
have
A
some
phone-
practice for it.
Listen, Mr.
Okay,
Silvestri
one
calling
person.
me because my son didn't do 4 assignments is not going to increase his knowledge before retaking that test. My son doing the assignments is going to make sure that he understands the material before taking the test.
Right, but the call home is to get him to do the assignments, right?
Correct.
Because right now, we already have a mechanism for him to do the assignments until the end of that quarter, right? Because he can still, so if there was a test, right, and they want to retake the test, like, I hate to talk about that, there's loopholes already inside how this could be applied by our teachers, but if Mr. Silvestri calls home and says, listen, Damani really wants to retake this test because I'm sorry, I've talked about Tyrone too much. Damani really wants to retake this test, but I'm concerned that if he doesn't do these assignments that are already late, then he's not going to be prepared for this test. And I can't prevent him from taking the test, but I'm concerned that he won't be successful. He's now engaging with the family, he's explaining why it's important, and there it lies, whether or not the parent, guardian at home is then also supporting, hey, you know what, these assignments are late, you want to take this test again, I'm here with Mr. Silvestri. I don't think that this line is needed for that to happen.
But
Well, while
with
it
the
might-
communication that you're describing, it's already in the policy. And additionally, and I have to say this, we're talking about potentially not having this amendment added to the policy because of the potential for teacher buy-ins. But just 20 minutes ago, we were talking about how much we need to trust the teachers. So which one is it?
I'm going to pause here. I'm going to pause. Amanda, and then we can go ahead. and
Okay,
go back.
I was going to, make the argument too, while it might not be the norm, there might be students who don't have the support at home, who don't have teachers or parents who will, light that fire to have them do the assignments so that they can, therefore do well on the test or at least pass it. And then I also wanted to say, quickly to an example that you were giving earlier, Jamaica, is that, maybe one student participates in class, the teacher does know that they know the material and, but they haven't done the assignments. Well, that's where the may come into place because the teacher has seen that, this student does know the material and therefore doesn't have to do the remediation. Or, maybe doesn't have to, or it only has to do 1 instead of 2 or 3 or whatever it may be. But the other student doesn't participate in class, has shown no evidence of being able to do the work at all, and, it bombs the test, and now the teacher has to make a decision. Well, do they both have to do the remediation, or the one who I really don't know if they know the material? I mean, that right there isn't biased to me, that's just using your brain and saying, okay, this one I know this student can do it, and this student I don't know, so they're gonna have to do the remediation.
Okay, and I don't like the word remediation, actually, I'm stuck on that. So I was wondering if something like this might help. Teachers may require students to complete prior missing assignments before students are able to retake an assessment for a new grade. Remediation to me sounds negative. I don't know, I don't
Yeah,
like that.
I would.
I like it.
I just want to point out something outside of this policy. any student in Schenectady City Schools and in New York State can challenge a Regents examination at any point in time without any prior assignments, without even passing the course. They can challenge it. If they get an 85 or higher, they can challenge it. And so I just want to make sure you understand that New York State Regents, the Board of Regents, the state, a kid could fail a course, could challenge the exam. Again, may not likely happen, but we do have had cases where it's had happened, where kids get an 85 or higher, and they are inherently given credit for the course without inherently sitting for the course. Our policy would be more restrictive than what the state education department does regarding Regents exams and kids just walking in and taking an exam. So I just want to be clear, this happens sometimes for international students to come in and they want to sit and challenge it because they took it maybe in their country and it did not translate to this country when their transcript. So I just want to be careful that requiring kids to retake or do assignments to take a classroom assessment, I think is opposite. But I don't have a problem if teachers are given full discretion if they want to institute that. But I'm going to tell you more often than not, they're already doing discretion around things to make sure the kid's either successful or the kid has multiple opportunities. I don't know how this sentence hurts the policy, and I don't think it changes the benefits of the policy. So I think for me, I'm neutral, but I want you guys to understand that a kid could go around. I didn't like with my grade, my son came home with a 72 on something. I'd like him to retake the exam. This says the kid has that opportunity without a teacher saying, no, they can't retake it. This would give them that opportunity to retake it. What the addendum would say is, if Carlos didn't do 2 assignments, I can tell you as a parent, they can't retake it because they didn't do 2 assignments, even though they took it once and got a 72.
It wasn't necessarily saying, no, you can't take it. It was more along the lines of, hey, listen, you're going to fail this again, or you're going to score poorly on this again, directly resulting from you not turning in the previous formative assessments that were handed out. So you can retake this test after you turn in, even split it down the middle. 3 were given, you didn't do 3, give me 1.5. Just something to make sure that you are actually prepared to be able to take this test, so we're not setting you up for failure again. And we're also reinforcing the importance of doing the assignments that were given. They were given for a reason.
Yeah, but the thing is here is the assumption is it's failure. It could be a 70.
Right.
It could be a 69. The kid technically still passed the assignment, and for us to say no to that kid because he didn't do, or the teacher could say no to that kid because they didn't do 2 earlier assignments, because number one, they don't want to have the burden to rescore another exam potentially, and they're going to use that. And again, that goes back to that piece where they could use it because they may require it. They don't have to require it. They could just say, no, that's fine, you can take the exam again. And I think that's where we have to be careful with the policy, is that people don't have to require it. And so then for me, that tells me why even have the language in here if they wouldn't have to require it.
Because again, and I'm very firmly planted in this, what is the point of giving assignments if they're not going to mean anything after they've been given or if they have not been completed. There's no point in doing it, and the teacher is wasting their time. You are paying them for half the work that they're actually required to do if a student is not required to turn in formative assignments. So this is why I am stressing this and trying to just somehow meet in the middle.
That's fine.
So I think we might be ready to vote, okay? So, so the amendment, because I heard a yes from Vivian and Amanda. Teachers may require students to complete prior missing assignments before students are able to retake an assessment for a new grade. I move that Amendment 1 be added to the proposed grading. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4. Vivian, Nohalani, Amanda. Bernice. Opposed?
Aye.
Jamaica, Kathy, and Erica. The motion carries. That's Amendment 1. Okay, Amendment 2.
All right, so where it states K through 12 grading, first bullet, students who hand in late assignments will not be penalized by receiving a lower grade in mastery for those assignments within the marking period. With that being said, the lateness of assignments will be reflected in the effort or behavior portion of the report card. My proposed amendment is to add to that, students who hand in late summative assessments will not be penalized by receiving a lower grade in mastery for those assignments within the marking period. Teachers have the discretion to penalize formative assessments due to lateness. With that being said, the lateness of assignments will be reflected in the effort or behavior portion of the report card for both formative and summative assessments.
Second?
Second.
To discuss.
Yep, to discuss. Okay, any questions, comments, discussion?
This, we already discussed this. It is reflective of a previous proposed amendment. Giving a grade deduction on an assignment based on its timeliness is grading for the behavior, not the knowledge content of the student.
Any other comments? Okay, looks like we're ready to vote. I move that Amendment 2 be added to the proposed grading policy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vivian and Amanda. Opposed?
Aye.
The motion does not carry. Oh, sure.
So, just want to make sure I capture this correctly, because we'll have to make the change to the final version. It will still state everything that was amended under bullet 3 under the K through 12 grading,
Correct.
except we were asking to just add the following sentence at the end. Teachers,
May require students to complete prior missing assignments before students are able to retake an assessment for a new grade.
okay, thanks.
No, we aren't putting that in.
Yeah, we are. It was 4 to 3.
It was 4 to 3.
It went,
I thought that was on the last one.
You and Erica.
No, I
Yeah.
know the vote was 4 to 3 on that.
yeah, that
I
one,
thought
that one,
was on-
that
I
one,
thought
that one was
on the
approved.
second one.
Yeah, that one was approved. It was Eric, I'm sorry, it was
Yeah.
Vivian, Nohalani, myself, and Amanda.
Right. So the policy now will
Okay.
be considered with that amended change.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay. Before I read my final statement, I do want to thank the board for engaging in this conversation for the last 3 or 4 board meetings. It's been a good conversation. We've had a lot of diverging opinions, which is really important to engage in, and I really appreciate the openness for everybody to have these conversations. So thank you, board, and thank you, superintendent. Okay, so we have concluded our discussion on the grading policy. I motion that we vote on the adoption of the grading policy 7218 with the one addition. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, VP. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Vivian. All in favor?
Any
Aye.
additional comments?
Yep, any comments? Go ahead.
I find it disturbing that we are creating a grading policy to remove bias, but we added a statement that includes bias. While I think as a whole that we've done impeccable and amazing work, and it has been tireless, and we've been very thoughtful and intentional about how to ensure that across our buildings, across the entire school district, that the grading policy will be consistent at all levels, including the fact that at a back-to-school night recently, I saw firsthand how varied the grading policy is from class to class, that the consideration for curves versus lateness versus homework is worth this versus, like, it was amazing to be in that building and recognize I've got a syllabus from every single class and how varied it is on grading. So I know how important and timely this is, and past due. Thank you so much for the impeccable work of people that have been working on this for, I don't know, a decade. But yeah, we did all that work, and then in the end, we threw in a little bias and a policy to address bias.
I'm going to respond by that and say this. When you are a hammer, everything to you is a nail. And operating under the assumption of looming potential bias from the very teachers we say that we respect, need, honor, and trust is entirely unfair all across the board. Just because we want to call something bias does not mean that it actually is bias. And by definition, giving a teacher the room to actually teach their class the way that they see fit according to the needs of their students is not bias.
I am just going to make one comment. The article that we received a while ago, I think, I'm not sure, it was a Harvard article. One thing I thought was interesting, and that's why this conversation about the assignments is that one particular amendment is interesting, because one of the things that is said in that article is, like, using the sports analogy, that, you know, and I was a soccer player, right? So you go to practice, right? You go to practice so that you learn the skills to be able to perform in a good way, a proficient way. And I remember when I played soccer, if I did not attend my practices, which I always did, but let's say I didn't, we would have to do suicide runs. We would have to do something to kind of make up for the time that I wasn't there. And the reason why I mention this is because at Harvard, which I thought it was a good article that we all were provided with, it kind of talks about how important the practice is. So with that one amendment, I see it as giving the student and the teacher the opportunity to provide that practice that was given to other students, giving them that practice so that then they can take the assessment again. I don't think that this necessarily, the way I see it, doesn't penalize the student, because they're still not getting a negative grade with the mastery grade, but they're being provided with that opportunity to practice before they take the exam. So again, I do want to thank everyone, and thank you again, Mr. Silvestri and Carmela and the whole team. And I know I mentioned it before, and Jamaica mentioned it today too, because this is a lot of work. And we only had 3 or 4 meetings, so I can imagine the conversations that you all have. So we really appreciate everything you do. And thank you, Superintendent, for bringing this to the board and for us having those conversations again. So thank you. Okay. So the next order of business.
We haven't voted.
Oh my goodness. Here we go. Thank you. I'm just checking if you guys are all paying attention. So a motion for the adoption of
We did that already.
we did do that one.
We got the first.
So moved?
We decided.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Thank you. Okay, the next order of business are the consent agenda items. The consent agenda items includes items that are approved by consent without a vote and were previously sent to the board for review. However, single items can be considered separately and taken off the consent agenda by a single member if they wish to do so. Would anyone like a consent agenda item removed? Hearing none, resolutions 6 through 8D as itemized on the consent agenda are presented for approval. I'll accept a motion to approve these items. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kathy. Second?
Second, Erica.
Erica, thank you, Erica. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. We have a second opportunity for comments from the public or board members. Any final comments?
I have one.
Sure.
That strikes me in our discussion about this, that one of the things I'm concerned about are taking into consideration with any other kinds of policy is the administrative burden a policy places on the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a cost. It's not just that it's a cost, it's time, it's everything. And I know in other aspects of my life, when we've looked at, there's actually been a weighting factor in terms of what the administrative burden of a particular policy might be. And that's one thing, I think that we have to bear in mind when we're looking at policies, so.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Kathy. Any other comments?
I would just say thank you to the board for the grading policy. It was, I'm not sure if you understand that we now have a policy, and now the real work really starts for us to talk about implementation, to kind of Kathy's point, training, educating folks, going back to our Infinite Campus, our vendor, to make sure we can capture the 3 areas, customizable. So now the real work begins, but I will tell you the fact that I know not everyone agreed with everything, but the fact that we got here is a big deal. There are many school systems who are starting to have these conversations, and yet Schenectady, again, at least in the capital region, is leading the way when it comes to things that are student-centered. And I think there were a lot of examples given, and I appreciate them. And we will try to make sure that the policies and regulations reflect effective practices to support this work. So I just wanted to say thank you. It is a big deal. It isn't something that's just any other policy. Grading is very personal because we all go back to our own lived experiences, and we go back to those, if you have children, you go to their current experiences. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any other comments? Okay. An executive session is now called for the purpose of discussing the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation. I'll accept the motion to go into executive session. Motion? Thank you, Board Member Jamaica.
Second.
Thank you, VP. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Good evening, everyone. Have a good night.
Just Shannon and Tyrone stay.
I have to catch a plane in the morning, let's go. Thanks so much. I went back and read all the articles, and I just had two procedures. Thank you, from my understanding that we did that one.
I just want to make sure that make sure you send that language to her so she can update the policy before we put it online.
Yeah, I will.
I expected Larry to comment.
Thank you. So Mike Sheridan reached out about the teacher center. Yeah. So I didn't want to respond until I spoke to you. Because was that the parents that Mike is doing?
Oh, yes, I told them. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, no problem. And Jamaica, I think, stepped out, so when she comes back. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just so tired. Okay, I'll wake up. So I was just wondering, before I respond, well, actually, is she on? It's in person? The meetings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how that would work. I mean, I guess I could. I just. He didn't say. He just wants to know.
I did tell him I was gonna. Oh yeah, I did tell him I would be on it again, and then I asked him if it would be in person or virtual. He said in person, which might be hard for me sometimes. That's what the problem I had the last time.
That they, yeah.